And I think we are live. Hello.
Hello, everybody. My name is April, affectionately known as Abby Do, and you're watching the Noteworthy podcast. And my co-host, Michael.
I am Michael Johnson. I'm your other co-host.
So I
And
want to first.
if you can see my Twitter handle there is Nilo Nostrum. Um, Go ahead.
Oh, somebody's watching us in the other room, and I can hear the delay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Okay. So I want to start out by thanking RBN Long Beach, the Long Beach chapter that's run by Compton CJ, for giving us this opportunity to talk shit. So thank you, CJ. And I also want to thank Zoya, who has helped us along the way to get to where we are today, which is right here with you on the show. So I'm going to pass it over to Michael and let him do his thing.
Okay. So to get right into it, I was wanting to start with talking about Ukraine. And since I'm Canadian, I thought I'd talk a little bit about how Canada's continuing to support Ukraine to the hilt, as diehard as they can, at least publicly. They've been making all kinds of statements about how behind Ukraine they are. Liberals and conservatives are fighting each other over how much they can prove to the public about how much they support Ukraine. And yet we've been hearing there's been a shift with the American policy about the funding of Ukraine, and so it doesn't seem to line up with their public statements. There seems to be a possibility of peace with Ukraine if anyone wants to come to reality, but seems like pride is leading things at the moment. So I wanted to start with a video clip from the House of Commons from November 24th. So here we go.
The honourable member from Calgary Heritage.
For Ukrainians fighting a fierce winter Russian offensive, hope dies last. Canada's Conservatives unequivocally support Ukraine. But you know what doesn't help? NDP Liberals putting a carbon tax in their trade agreement right there in Section 13. A carbon tax on the concrete and steel, $300 billion worth of infrastructure that Ukraine needs to rebuild. From this Prime Minister, the same man that betrayed Ukraine and sent emissaries to be best friends with Vladimir Putin, betrayed Ukraine and refused to let Canadian gas break European dependence on Putin, betrayed Ukraine and supplied Putin a turbine to fund his war machine.
That's right.
Conservatives will deliver the deal that Ukrainians want, that their ambassadors told Canadians last night. Not for taxes, but for defense production. Not for taxes, but for energy partnerships. By advancing taxes over victory, they put their partisan interests over the national interests of Canadians and Ukrainians. We will never back down, never give in, never surrender. Conservatives will always stand for Ukraine.
Yes.
So the conservatives there are talking about the free trade agreement between Canada, and I find it a bit ironic that they call it a free trade agreement when they're basically enslaving the Ukrainian economy because they don't have any choice, So if anything, you have any thoughts about that, Abby? I also found it interesting that there's an interesting thing about how the Russians were saying since 2014 there's 13,000 to 14,000 have been killed in Donbass, and the numbers, just a bit of a synchronicity there I found with the numbers in Palestine. So just found it interesting how believes it was particularly intolerable that the so-called civilized West had preferred not to notice that for 8 years, and then that's what triggered the war in Donbass, and they're talking about war crimes in the Donbass, and that was all treated as nothing, and now there's a whole big looks like I lost my co-host here. Well, this is a good stream going so far, but on we go. So I found it interesting that the Russians were talking about 14,000 civilians died, but it turns out that there's it'd be 14,000 total dead, including the soldiers. So on both sides, so that number is a little bit suspicious. And then to fact check that, I was looking into what the Donbass ministry says about it. This is from February 20th, 2022. How many lives has the war in Donbass taken? So since 2014, about 9,000 civilians have been killed in Donbass. Such data were presented at the press conference, Scorched Memory of Donbass, War Crimes of the Ukrainian Army, and New Data on the Massacres of the Civilian Population. According to the representative of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the self-proclaimed Lugansk People's Republic, more than 2,000 civilians were killed during the conflict in the Republic, 3,365 people injured. And the Commissioner for Human Rights in the self-proclaimed Donetsk People's Republic said that more than 5,000 people became victims among the population. About 8,000 people were injured. So that goes to show you that not everything that Russia says is completely accurate, and we know that. However, there's no denying that there's been many people killed in war crimes by the Ukrainians, and that there was potentially a need for the Russians to step in. And so there's an irony there about how it's seen as perfectly normal for Israel to need to do what they do, and yet there's that double standard with the Russians here, when there's far more children killed far faster in Ukraine. So moving on here, I just wanted to show this about how NATO's logistic boss panics over Russia's war in Ukraine, warns Europe military Schengen needed. So seems like maybe NATO is not prepared for a wider war.
I'm sorry about that, Michael. It's raining horribly here in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and my Wi-Fi my StreamYard just kind of went down. So you were talking about Ukraine, and I found that really interesting because they're still like going hard for Ukraine, but the writing's on the wall, isn't it? Right. I wanted to share something.
Yeah, sorry.
I wanted to share something about Ukraine I thought was pretty funny. So let me share my screen. It's good old Morning Joe, where we love to get our my best laughs come from the Morning Joe show. Joe and Mika. So here we go.
Okay.
So Richard Haas, he's been trying to sell us a dream on Ukraine since the beginning of the war, and now he's telling us that we need to lower our expectations. The expectations he set, by the way.
on mute. I can't hear it. Not, can you hear it? No sound.
You're saying there's no sound?
Yeah, I can't hear it. It's not muted on the video. But...
Yeah, it's not. It's sound.
Yeah, he's got some comments saying no sound.
No sound. There's definitely sound there.
Well, maybe the visual. We're going to need some sound. It's a 3-minute video. So.
Okay.
Yeah,
well, basically, this is what he's saying, and I'll try to fix that sound. He's saying that we have to define the gap between our expectations and what's happening now. And I'm like, what is that gap? It's like the gap is Ukraine lost, right? Let me go to
redefine your expectations back in alignment with reality.
Right, with reality. Like, what are you talking about? I'm looking for the map because here it is. We don't have sound, but we have visual. Okay, what did Russia get? Everything they wanted, right? They got Crimea and they got the Donbass. That's all they wanted. Yeah. And at the end of this video, he says, we're gonna have to do a ceasefire so we can reveal Putin for who he really is. And I'm like, a winner? What?
Even if they already have what they want, and it's in the situation now, from what I can tell on the battlefront, that they're able to take more than what they have now, but that would be more than what they want. So what they don't really want to take all of Ukraine, but I know there's a bit of an encirclement in Avdiivka that doesn't seem to be able to hold up much longer, which is a repetition of the whole Bakhmut situation a couple months ago. So it's just been going bad to worse for them this entire time, but the PR machine will not tell us until the last moment.
Right. Like the very person that was telling us that Ukraine was winning the entire time, and we're like, there's no way Ukraine can win this war. Like, just by sheer numbers, it doesn't make any sense. We're just laundering our tax dollars in the tune of billions and billions of dollars. Like, we all know what this is. Well, not all of us. Some of us have Ukraine flags still on our Twitter and Facebook. So,
although many of those decided to switch quickly they dropped the Ukraine flag for the Israel flag,
right,
quite quickly.
Wait a minute, I have another war to go to tend to. I'll be back. Crazy.
So I've got some more videos I could try playing here. We could see if those have got sound, if you'd like.
Charlie Brown says, I remember when they told us Putin wanted to take over all of Europe. Right? I remember when Rachel Maddow told us Russia was going to cut off our electricity. Like, they just say anything. Anything to fearmonger us.
Well, and this is one of the videos I was going to show, is talking about maybe Putin doesn't want to take over all of Europe, but it looks like NATO might not quite be prepared if they did try. So, because they've been putting a lot of effort into Ukraine, they're bankrupting themselves and giving out all their weapons. And then logistically, they're not even prepared to work with each other across border to defend their own borders.
Yeah. Before you play that, another thing that was said in that clip was Morning Joe said, well, NATO's has done an extraordinary job. And I'm like, losing? They get a participation trophy? Like, what are you even talking about? But go ahead, you can roll the clip. Let's see what you got. You ready?
Oh, I maybe started a little soon here. Gotta add it to stage. Here we go. And now let's try that again. Get going.
So, they're running out of a lot of things at this time. Yeah, they're running out of a lot of things, not just time.
This is from Hindustan Times will say this, but not the British press or American press.
We all knew that. Okay.
Found this one particularly funny. NATO must not prompt a miscalculation in the Kremlin by giving them the impression they might stand a chance. Because we're not prepared.
You think? Well, they spent time to get prepared with the NISA movement, right? That was just the start. That was just giving them time to,
So that's basically that.
Yeah, that was just giving them time on weapons. All right.
So I've got other videos, but if you want to move on to the next, if we're getting short on time, maybe.
Yeah, go ahead. You have another segment, right?
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly show Cyrus Jansen video now next. Part of it anyways. Oh, we've got to not forget to do this in the right order. Here we go.
Then the Israel and Hamas war. But in an absolute shocking turn of events, U.S. and EU officials are now quietly talking. Conversations have included very broad outlines of what Ukraine might need to give up to reach a deal with Russia. Just look at the incredible reversal from Time magazine, who last year named Zelensky the 2022 Person of the Year. But much like public sentiment across Western countries has changed, Time magazine now reports the situation as the lonely fight of Vladimir Zelensky. Inside the article, it states Zelensky feels betrayed by his Western allies and goes on to quote one of his advisors who has this to say about the Ukrainian president. He deludes himself. We are out of we're not winning, but try telling them that. This is the beginning of the end of Ukraine. And as I'll explain in today's video, we will look back on this failure for the US and NATO as the defining moment when the world moved away from American hegemony and officially shifted to a multi-billions of dollars to Ukraine. We've donated so many weapons that we've depleted our own ammunition reserves, and we've convinced join the American-led sanctions against Russia. For the better part of 2 years, we've heard nothing from Western media other than Ukraine is winning, Putin is losing, the Russian economy is on the verge of collapsing. But the reality couldn't be farther from the truth. First of all, the vast majority of the world refused to join Russian sanctions. Over 100 countries around the globe, including the world's largest democracy, India, have not sanctioned Russia. Why? Because sanctions never work, and Russia is too important of a supplier for energy resources. Before the war, India imported less than 3% of crude oil from Russia. Fast forward to today, and India buys more than 40% of crude oil from Russia. Even the United States, who ironically led the charge to force sanctions on Russia, is still doing business with Putin's government. According to the New York Times, American companies are paying around $1 billion a year to Russia's state-owned nuclear agency, about its pre-war exchange rate against the dollar, and most significantly, Russia has positioned itself to endure this war for however long it takes. Over the past few months, we've seen a significant shift from U.S. senior officials, who have started to use the word stalemate to describe the war in Ukraine. Just listen to this clip from Senator Josh Hawley after Zelensky traveled to Washington, D.C. and asked the U.S. Congress for additional funding.
That in the words of President Zelensky, the conflict is a total stalemate, which is so what the administration said yesterday. They want to spend $100 billion more, our money, more over the next year in the hopes that it will remain a stalemate. Which leads me to ask, what is the goal here for the United States? I mean, what is it this administration wants to do? I have no earthly idea. They used to say victory, victory, victory. Now it's stalemate forever. In fact, yesterday, Millie said there will be no military victory.
Essentially,
that sounds familiar. So I'm going to, that sounds so familiar. Okay, I was looking at this article. Pentagon confirms 4 new attacks on U.S. bases after defense airstrikes, right? So I'm not going to go, for sake of time, I'm not going to go into all of it, but so troops were hit 4 times by Iranian-backed groups. Of course, you know, they're trying to go to war with Iran, so now we gotta make them boogeymen. The Pentagon Deputy Press Secretary Sabrina Singh said that we've been attacked 46 times since October 17th. Okay, 24 attacks in Iraq, 22 in Syria. So a total of 56 troops have been injured in the attacks, but most are minor injuries, and every service member has been since returned to duty, according to the Pentagon. So I don't know if they got like paper cuts with their drones, and I don't know. The latest attacks follow a U.S. airstrike Wednesday, which took out 4 major weapons facilities in Syria. Okay, cool. I'm gonna go down to this part, which I found extremely interesting. So Singh said that the U.S. is carrying out proportionate responses, but did not seek to escalate the conflict, while the primary mission was to ensure that the Israel-Hamas war does not widen. Now, if you've been hit 56 times, I'm sorry, 40, whatever that number was, it was a high number. Is one strike proportionate to being hit all of those times? I call bullshit. I think this the title of this should say, Pentagon confirms 4 new defensive attacks on U.S. bases after offensive airstrikes. So basically, they're responding, right? They're responding to our bullshit, but we have to paint it the other way around. And people are like catching on to this stuff. I unfortunately cannot share my entire screen because you won't hear audio. So I have to share one by one. But people are catching on to this. Like, this is the Twitter. What's coming up? I have a delay because of the weather here, so I apologize. But the article was posted on Twitter, right? Well, this is me being silly. So you went meddling and fucked around and found out. Okay. Shouldn't a defensive airstrike come after or during an attack, not before? Wouldn't it be more accurate to call their actions a response? Yes, it would. And this, why the fuck do we have so many bases over there? We know why. We definitely know why.
There's a disproportionate amount of funding. There's a disproportionate amount of retaliation strikes. A disproportionate amount of foreign bases.
It's a disproportionate amount of everything. But I'm going to share something with you about why. Of course, I have to do it separate, which makes it makes this not move as nice as I would like it to move, but we're getting through it. So a big reason why they didn't like Trump was because he says the quiet part out loud, right? He just didn't give a damn.
Yeah.
So what does he say here? He's in front of.
I want to thank the president for the job they've done. Again, this has been thousands of years in the process between borders between these countries and other countries that we're involved with 7,000 miles away. So we want to worry about our things. We're keeping the oil. We have the oil. The oil is secure. We left troops behind only for the oil. And I have to just finish by saying that the president and I we've been very good friends. We've been friends for a long time, almost from day one. And we understand each other's country. We understand where we're.
Okay, but you get it. We're keeping the oil. The oil's ours. Finders keepers, losers weepers. And that's pretty much the gist of it. And he says that in front of Erdogan.
We'll be very grateful that he said that. People will never forget that.
And that's why they don't like him, because he doesn't know how to lie with a smile on his face. He just says it.
So you were talking there about Syria with the oil, so that maybe helps segue into another video I was going to show from another question period moment in the Canadian Parliament. This time talking about Kurdistan, Russia, and landmines. So I will share my screen. I forgot to add to stage first. My bad. Always doing things in the wrong order. We'll get that sorted, hopefully.
Strathcona.
Yeah, I'm
Mr. Speaker,
interested
it's being
about this.
reported that Russia is getting made in Canada through Kurdistan. This would mean the detonators in Ukraine. Mr. Speaker, this is outrageous. Canada used to be a leader in demining efforts. We should be doing everything we can to help Ukraine demine. Instead, because of weak arms and sanction enforcement, Canada may actually be inadvertently armed. Canada in landmine detonators at all.
So I didn't really need to get into the response. I just thought it was interesting to hear the question being asked. The Americans are funding the Russians, the Canadians are funding the Russians, and they still can't seem to figure it at all. They're so mystified.
Right. I mean, isn't that the way, like, we always fund the boogeyman, and then we call him the boogeyman? The world is a stage, and they're actors. They're just not as cute as the ones in the TV shows. So,
but they're talking about Kurdistan almost like it's a real country, and then it makes me think it's an interesting topic because it's similar to the case of the Palestinians. They are a something of a nation without a state, trying to establish a state, but there are interesting differences worth maybe pointing out.
Right, right.
So if you'd like, I have an article from the Washington Post we can go to.
Sure. Then I'll queue up my videos.
Sounds good. So, gotta take a look here. Where is it? So I thought this was a topic definitely worth talking about. Oh, that's a bit blurry. There we go. So are Kurds more like Jews or Palestinians? It depends on whom you ask. This is from September 25th, 2017. Today, Iraqi Kurds are going to the polls to decide whether to seek independence from Iraq. So far, only one world leader has publicly backed the cause: Netanyahu. There are concrete geopolitical reasons for Israel to support Kurdish independence, but a number of writers have suggested a deeper connection. They've highlighted ties between the Kurdish quest for independence and Israel's own history. For supporters, the Kurds and the Jews are both ancient Middle Eastern peoples, targeted for genocide by exterminationist neighbors. They are embattled, once stateless minorities, moderate and secular outcasts in a sea of Arab extremism. In the most enthusiastic accounts, the shared history of the Jews and the Kurds can be traced to Cyrus the Great and Saladin. More modestly, it goes back at least as far as the 1960s, when Israel supported Mustafa Barzani in his fight against Saddam Hussein. His son Massoud now leads the Kurdistan regional government. But political metaphors can be fickle. Many in the region see the similarities between the Kurds and Israel in a decidedly more sinister light. After Netanyahu expressed his support for Kurdish independence, former Iraqi Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki announced that Baghdad would not allow the creation of a second Israel in northern Iraq. Meanwhile, in Turkey, opponents of Kurdish independence doubled down on long-standing anti-Semitic conspiracy theories, sound familiar, that the Kurds are Zionist puppets, if not secretly Jews themselves. The Turkish media has long speculated about the Jewish ancestry of Massoud Barzani and shared maps purporting to show Kurdistan's place in the increasingly grandiose geography of Greater Israel, which we've heard about lately.
Right, right.
What makes the current rhetorical alignment between Israel and the Kurds even more striking, though, is that in previous decades, the Kurds were more commonly cast as Palestinians. But both the Palestinian and the Kurdish independence movements, along with their respective Soviet-supported insurgent groups, emerged from the Cold War as popular left-wing causes whose violent tactics received consistent condemnation from the right. When Kurdish leader Jalal Talabani called the contested city of Kirkuk the Kurds' Jerusalem, for example, he intended the metaphor to be read from the Palestinian perspective. The Kurdish-Palestinian alignment manifested itself in the cooperation between the PLO and the Kurdistan Workers' Party, which trained and even fought together in Lebanon during the 1980s. This helped solidify a rival alliance between U.S.-allied governments in Turkey and Israel. If PKK leader Abdullah Öcalan later claimed that the Turks made an agreement with Israel to kill Kurds, in Turkey it was Öcalan's alignment with the PLO that helped legitimize Israel's policies toward the Palestinians. As long as Ankara and Jerusalem believed they were facing a common terrorist threat, each side could identify with the other's willingness to prioritize security concerns over human rights. So,
interesting.
I could finish that. I think that's maybe a good enough point to stop.
That's interesting. I don't know that much about the Kurds, though. So thank you for sharing that, because that's something I need to read up on myself.
Yeah, it'd be nice to read a bit more from sources other than the Washington Post, but that caught my eye, and I thought it was interesting to see how the Kurds have been used as a bit of a football from both sides, depending on what interests align at the time. So
Right. I mean, it's all a give and take of what you have and what I can take.
And the Turks are a big part of the story too. There's a whole big thing about how when the Turks wanted to work with the Israelis, that's what they'll do, and then when they want to maybe work with the Palestinians, it's kind of how they play Russia and NATO against each other. They're that in that sweet spot in the middle. So.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, I want to show a little something about Palestine, in the same vein as the Y, that little, I don't know what that little thing is. What kind of animal that was? But this video is from 9 years ago. Okay, but I think it's interesting to kind of see like where we were with Palestine 10 years ago compared to where we are now, so we could see if maybe in hindsight if we knew that then we would understand what's going on now. So let me just play this. And let me know if you don't hear it, but you should, because I fixed that.
Step into Wix Studio, the new web creation platform built for.
But you can hear it, right?
Yeah.
This corporate video touts the exciting prospects for Israel as an oil producer. By no means in amounts approaching its Arab neighbors, but still a promising economic asset for a country that's always been a big energy importer. The company licensed to drill in this area plans up to 14 wells, one of them already pumping commercial quantities of oil.
The quality of this oil is top quality, is one of the best one can find in the world. And when we sell it, we're receiving the top quality for this oil on the average price way over $100 per barrel.
What the company doesn't stress is plain to see. Its Megid oil field lies within shouting distance of the Israeli separation barrier. Though the Israeli government won't talk about it, by many estimates, only 20% of the oil field is inside Israel, the rest extending into the occupied West Bank. Palestinian experts suspect the Israelis have already begun drilling into their territory.
They have made a horizontal excavation in the Megid 5 and Megid 4, but they have a problem. They need to extend, more and more inside the West Bank and to the east. And I think that this is the main reason why the Israelis, they are asking for land swap in this area.
The Palestinians.
Now, doesn't that sound a lot like we're keeping the oil? We have the oil. It's like a recurring theme going on here.
The Indian government says it's helpless to stop the Israeli project despite provisions in the Oslo Accords for continuing cooperation in energy development.
The World Bank has reported that the Palestinian Authority stands to increase its.
So I just want to, the way they said that, oh, we're helpless. There's nothing we can do. Our hands are tied behind our back. So like the Oslo Accords, the set of agreements between Israel and the Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, right? So you know how they got together in Norway for those secret meetings? I think it was like the early 90s or something like that, for that two-state solution, which didn't work. So they disbanded the PLO and came up with the Palestinian Authority, right? So, because why don't we just rebrand it and polish the turd, and maybe people will think we're doing something, right?
And the recurring theme, the Oslo Accords are a deal they could have taken, and if they had just respected each other, wouldn't be in this mess. And there's a recurring theme with Ukraine. Had they just, Minsk Accords agreements, they could have been out of it, but greed wins the day. So.
Well, even after the Minsk Accords, they had another agreement on the table that Russia was ready to sign. And I forgot his name, told them, don't sign it. I forgot his name.
Boris Johnson. Yeah.
There you go. Thank you. So yeah, same thing. It's like history keeps repeating itself, and we act surprised every time. We should know this song
lesson
already.
learned. Lesson repeated until lesson learned. That's what my dad used to say.
Right. Okay. So let me.
Palestinian Authority stands to increase its gross domestic product by at least 1/3 and reduce its dependence on international aid if Israel allowed it to fully exploit the natural resources on what the bank calls restricted land like this.
Meanwhile, the Palestinian gas company has signed.
So they could, right? If they can only do something, their hands are tied. Like there's no whiteout, there's no erasers available, there's no conscience to be had. We just got to go with it because it's on paper.
A 20-year contract
from
to
9 years
supply
ago.
its power station with natural gas from Israel's offshore Leviathan field. That would make Palestinians the gas field's first foreign customer. But
okay, that really pissed me off. So the Palestinians are going to be a foreigner to their own gas. Like language is so important. And he's saying it like that's amazing. That would make the Palestinians their first foreign customer. Like what?
It's like the colonialism
like,
is baked so deep in the minds of these people.
Right. Right. It's like, it sounds familiar, like the indigenous people that were forced into reservations. And it's like, how are they foreigners to their own land? Like, this is just peak colonizer behavior. It's ridiculous. Okay, let me see if I have anything else I want to say about this video. Yeah, that's about it. Let me, you can take me off because I want to move on to my next video.
Yeah, okay.
If you don't mind taking me off because I can't share my entire screen. So
you want me to take that away? Or you want me
Yes.
to take you off?
No, that's fine. I could stay. Okay. Okay. For sake of time, I'm not gonna play the other video. But what I do want to play, which is hilarious to me, is my new favorite go-to person, Michael Rappaport. He has been so unhinged lately that it's great to watch. I love it. I love it.
More entertaining now than he ever was.
Right. Okay, there you go.
In a messed up kind of way.
And yes, he reminds me of, he's like the new Keith Olbermann. He's just going crazy. And I love to see it.
So are you sharing something? Is it coming up?
Not yet. Not yet, because I had all of this organized, but now that I can't share my screen, now I have to like
You want
pick around and
maybe try and call it up quick, or I could see if
right.
you want to come back to that. Maybe I could do something in the meantime, or
Good. Oh, I found it. Here we go. Here we go. Oh no, that's not the right one, but yeah, we'll come back to it.
okay. Oh, looks like here it is.
Yeah, that's not the right
Can
one.
you play it?
We can play it, but it's out of order.
Oh.
It's out of order, but we could play this because no, go ahead. We could play this because it's also hilarious.
All right.
This whole crap with this cancel culture and the. Shut up! Shit! Shut the fuck up! Nobody wants to hear it. Fucker. You've been talking all fucking week. You don't care what you have to say. Just stop talking. You got me right in my fucking head, asshole. Stop. Damn it. This whole crap with this cancel culture and the. Oh, shut up!
Okay, I don't condone violence.
That's funny. I never saw that.
Oh my gosh, I don't condone violence. I mean, kind of, but
Snowball is not violence.
yeah, that's all right, right? It's like a pillow fight. So, oh, here it is. Here it is. Okay, great. It's out of order, but here we go.
Mind the delay.
The disappearing acts on some Doug Henning, David Blaine shit just disappeared. Boom! In the air. A lot of people have disappeared. I'm telling you right now, we are making a list. We are checking it twice. And we already know who's been naughty or nice. See that pun? You see that pun? I'm talking about the Jewish people, but I'm also talking Christmas carols. We will not forget. We're not suckers. So when you come around asking for this, that, and the third, come around asking for money, investments, and all that stuff, I promise you, it's being discussed. We're paying attention to who's being anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, or not saying anything at all. I promise you. We see. I'm the enigma. A lot of Jewish people seem nice. We seem like we're suckers. Seem like you could kind of convince us. Trust me, don't come around 6 months, 8 months, 2 years. We're remembering, we're paying attention.
Like, holy shit.
That's
What?
the memory of an elephant, eh?
What? Look, I had to like some of these because I'm like, wait a minute. He went from honorary black dude to I'm a Zionist Nazi in like 3 seconds. Like, what are you talking about? So you're Israeli or American? I'm confused, dog. But thanks for confirming. Y'all do run shit. A lot of people are trying to deny that. Right? Like, didn't that sound very? That's an anti-Semitic trope, isn't it?
That's the classic one, the big one, that they own everything, that they run the media, and then it turns out we were maybe using the wrong word. We were using Jew instead of Zionist.
Right,
That's,
right,
that's
right.
the hard part to say out loud.
Right.
Maybe I should be careful.
So maybe if we just say Zionist, then we won't be called anti-Semitic, right? So look, translation: Jews have all the money. If you do not cheer on the genocide of the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip, we won't give you any. Oh my gosh. Yeah, I think that's it. Oh, here's another one. This dude is shaking in his boots. Oh, scared of you. While then in America, we're threatening to allegiance to a foreign nation by a tiny minority that will use their disproportionate wealth, power, and influence against you if they don't find you sufficiently supportive. And that, in a nutshell, is AIPAC.
We all know the truth. The common people know.
Yeah, we know.
So is there anything else you want? Go ahead.
No, not about Israel. We can move on. We have like 10 minutes.
The last thing I wanted to talk about was the weather. If anyone wants to have a nice little chat about European weather.
Before you do that,
I think it's relevant for this upcoming. Yeah.
Before you do that, I do have one more Israel thing to share. And I thought this was really important because this is like how they other us into believing that, you know, we need to follow them. They dehumanize people. So we don't feel that we feel disconnected from them. So when they do things like this, genocide or war, we're desensitized to it. And when I say we, I'm not talking about me, but a vast majority of people. Now, this guy is, his name is, I think his name is Levy. He's a Gideon Levy, that's his name. He's an Israeli political journalist and a columnist on the editorial board of Haaretz. He's won several awards, so he's an expert, okay? And he was a speaker at the event for an organization called Washington Report on Middle Eastern Affairs. So let's see what he has to say. It's on YouTube. It's like an hour long or what have you, but I just
don't
wanted to show
recall
this.
one occupation in which the occupier present himself as the victim. Not only the victim, the only victim. If to phrase here, if to quote here the late Golda Meir, whom I quoted also last time, I know, but it is so unforgettable, I have to use it again. She once said that we will never forgive the Arabs for forcing us to kill their children. We are the victims. We are forced to kill their children. Poor us. And as the victim and the only victim in history, again, it enables us the rights to do whatever we want, and nobody is going to tell us what to do because we are the only victim. To this, there is a third very deep-rooted value, and this is the very deep belief. Again, everyone will deny it, but if you scratch under the skin of almost every Israeli, you'll find it there. Palestinians are not equal human beings like us. They are not like us. They don't love their children like us. They don't love life like us. They were born to kill. They are cruel. They are sadists. They have no values, no manners.
Isn't that crazy?
So actually, that's a yeah.
That is very telling.
That kind of makes me think of another. Yeah. Go ahead.
Go ahead. What that
I was just saying.
It reminds me of how in the U.S. they would talk about Black people, thugs, like the language is still there. Thugs. They called us. What else did they say about us? Well, I'm not even talking about when from back in the day. I'm just talking about like the war on drugs. I mean, the language gets worse the further you go back in history. But Clinton called us deplorables. No, what did she call us? I forgot. But you get my drift. Like that's the way I can't remember, but that's the way they other us. So things that are done to the Black community, it's like separate from other people's lives. They just go about their lives because, yeah, those are thugs. You could do that to them. They don't, they like to kill. They're gangsters.
Yeah, the genocide is pretty impossible without the first step of dehumanization. It's pretty hard to convince your people to exterminate others when they actually think that these others are human beings just like you and feel things too. And so it is impossible to do without the dehumanization. And
right.
So that.
Thank you, Tasman. It was super predator. Super predator is what she called us. These super predators. And it was Joe Biden.
What I wanted to do to close out because we're getting to the end here. So maybe we'll talk about the weather another time. I was just going to basically quickly cover how it seems like if you're taking a look at the longer term forecasts for this winter, that there's going to be a bit of a rough winter for at least parts of Europe, if not most of Europe. And that doesn't bode well for gas prices, which I think will also affect us here in North America. So sort of explains a little bit why it's so important to get to those gas reserves in Palestine.
And this reoccurring theme of You know, like you don't have to look too far to figure out they're bullshitting you. Like, see, when I was talking
They
about
got
the
the
Oslo Accords, our friend here says, look no further than the Paris Climate Accords to see the same thing. Like, right? It's all nice on paper. Maybe they should start um, writing sternly worded letters like progressives do. Right? If it's a
that'll work.
sternly worded letter, you know it's not going to get done.
So I think maybe to close, since the last thing you played, I think ties in nicely. I had a little video of a Israeli professor talking about um, how Israeli qualifies for a textbook case definition of genocide. So it's not
All
just
right.
ambiguous, but is textbook. So,
In other
see.
cases, there's two additional things that are important to note. One is that it also comes in the Israeli case with a lot of dehumanizing language, right? And we'll refer to that. So there's intent to destroy, but the intent to destroy here is also accompanied with explicit dehumanizing language. And then there is a language that actually should get us to think about historical cases of genocide. I'm referring specifically to, for example, ideas about deporting all the Palestinians in Gaza to the desert, right? Because we know that deserts actually have been used in genocides historically in the 20th century, specifically as weapons of genocide. And I'm thinking specifically about the Armenian genocide, but also the destruction of the Hariri and Nama in German Southwest Africa in the early 20th century, and other cases. So we can come back to that. But let me just break down for a minute these issues of intent and the dynamics of violence. So intent here, I think we all remember Israeli President Herzog early on referring to, quote, all the nation there, that is all the people, all the Palestinians in Gaza are responsible for the Hamas attacks. So taking a whole population, 2.3 million people, half of whom, by the way, are under the age of 18, right? And basically portraying them as enemy targets, right? As legitimate enemy targets. Now that's a clear genocidal language, right? And again, we've seen it, for example, in the Armenian genocide, where the Ottoman authorities decided the whole Armenian population of the empire are actually Russian agents in the frame of World War I and the Caucasus Front with Russia. So we have this kind of intent. Then we have Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, who early on promised to turn Gaza into, quote, rubble, which indeed Israel did, right? It's also important to see that Israeli authorities and the Israeli army did what they said they'll do, right? But then on the 29th of October, as Israel was starting its ground invasion, Netanyahu invoked the biblical story of Amalek, which is a story about total destruction. Total, that's the key here, right? Where the Israelites are ordered to destroy all of Amalek. He then doubled down on this a few days later in a special letter to Israeli soldiers and officers in the army, and again invoking the biblical story of Amalek. So we have a clear, basically, message from the head of the state, right, about the need to destroy a population that, as the president portrayed them, are all actually enemies. And we've seen this again and again, the portrayal of all Palestinians in Gaza as enemies. Now, we also, as I said, we have dehumanizing language. Israel Defense Minister Yoav Gallant, as we know, on the 9th of October, proclaimed the total siege, right, policy, cutting off food, water, fuel, medical supplies to Gaza, and describing Palestinians in Gaza as, quote, human animals. We also have Israeli state leaders and senior army officers and politicians describing Palestinians in Gaza as Nazis, and basically placing the Hamas attack on 7th of October in the frame of the Holocaust, right? Now, US President Biden did this as well, and actually senior politicians in Europe have also done this, and reinforcing this demonizing and dehumanizing language of portraying Palestinians as Nazis. Now, it's important to say, and the Hamas attack on 7th of October was an act of horrendous mass murder. It's without a doubt a case of war crime, and there are also crimes against humanity when you think about acts of torture, hostage taking, which is actually an ongoing crime, right? But it's not a crime related to the Holocaust in any way, and it's important to stress this. This idea of blurring completely different context, right? Of powerless Jews during World War II, facing one of the most powerful states and armies, Nazi Germany, and its allies. And here we have a very powerful state, Israel, with a powerful army, a nuclear power, backed by all the Western countries. And we have Palestinians who are for decades under Israeli settler colonial rule, Israel military occupation, siege, decades of documented crimes against them. Very, very different context. None of this takes away from the horrific nature of the Hamas attack on 7th of October, but the portrayal of the Hamas, and then by extension Palestinians, and in some cases it's just explicit, all Palestinians are Nazis. And again, this is something that is reproduced also by politicians in the US and the European Union. That's a dehumanizing element that also then, of course, if you're fighting Nazis, as former Israel Prime Minister Naftali Bennett said in his tantrum on Sky News on 12th of October, we're fighting Nazis, then no law applies, right? Everything is permissible, right? And of course, the legitimate aim of destroying everyone and everything in Gaza, it becomes clear that is indeed genocidal. Now, the dynamics of violence on the ground. So when we take all the elements of intent, the language, a dehumanizing language, portraying Palestinians as a whole as enemies, human animals, think about the discourse of human shields, which is incredibly important to note here, that Palestinians are humanized only when they appear as, quote, human shields, right? Which is, of course, incredibly dehumanizing. When you take all of this together with the dynamics of violence, now what we see on the ground is very clear. Israel has killed so far more than 12,000 Palestinians, more than 5,000 of them children, about 1,000 babies, injuring more than 30,000 Palestinians. We have more than half of all the buildings in Gaza have been destroyed. Agricultural land has been bombed and destroyed. The north, in particular, there's very little left of it, I think. There's documented use of white phosphorus bombs by Human Rights Watch. Israel has dropped, in general, more than 20,000 tons of explosives on Gaza in a bit more than a month. That's at least 1.5 Hiroshima bombs, as we know. So any kind of claim that Israel is targeting specifically Hamas militants or Hamas military installations, right? If you think about the levels of violence and destruction and the weapons used, that's an absurd claim, of course, right? And it confirms actually what Israeli army spokesperson Daniel Hagari said early on, that the goal is actually destruction and not accuracy, in his own words, right? But the key here, I think, is not just, again, it's enough to show that the levels, killing once we have intent is indeed genocidal killing, and the numbers actually are not the key issue here, right? But when you think about the total siege proclamation, right, the cutting off of water, food, fuel, medical supplies, together with a forced displacement of more than 1.5 million Palestinians of the 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza so far, right, especially because Israel has ordered the evacuation of Palestinians from the north to the south, that now, in the last 6 weeks, have created, actually, in the language of the convention, conditions calculated to bring about the destruction of the group. Why? Because indeed, the siege has created what it was meant to create. That is, we now face starvation conditions in Gaza, right? Palestinians there are facing starvation, surviving on less than 2 pieces of bread a day, 3 liters of water a day. Now, the World Health Organization recommends at least 100 liters of water a day for everything, cooking, washing, drinking. Of course, Palestinians are now surviving on 3 liters of water a day. Medical supplies have run out. Fuel is running out. We know that hospitals have been bombed. They have no medical supplies and fuel to do what hospitals need to save lives and treat people, certainly in a time of war. So we have now unbelievable overcrowding, conditions that are ripe for the outbreak of infectious diseases. So indeed, conditions calculated to bring about the destruction of the group in the language of the UN Convention. So we have both the intent and the dynamics of violence on the ground. And, again, because the intent is expressed so explicitly, so directly, in such unashamed ways, and it's continued to be expressed in this way, then I do think that what we're seeing in front of our eyes is a textbook case of genocide.
So there you have it. Anyways, that's we're over our time here. We're getting late, so thanks for tuning in. Hopefully we'll see you again next time.
Yeah, and I wanted to give a shout out to our brothers and sister channels. That would be Beyond the Arc and the Social Contract on the RBN Long Beach channel. So see you guys next time.
Have a good night.